All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. Reminder, Patrick needed this, so anybody else who needs a reminder to renew your membership if you haven't done it yet. So thanks, Patrick, for raising your hand today. Watch the May announcement. Sandy's working on that meeting, and we haven't quite nailed it down yet. So May, and then mark your calendars, June 4th. We're working on the program for another master class. We'll hold that at Schoen Farm on June 4th, kind of be like a 3/4 day type thing, but we'll have a lunch included and some good speakers lined up. Mauro's working on that program, so actually it looks to be pretty promising. More about that coming soon. And we'll just jump straight into today's presentation. So thank you, Cindy, for being here. Those of you, hopefully everybody knows Cindy, Dr. Cindy Kron at this point, but yeah, RUC North Coast IPM advisor. So thanks, Cindy, for being here to talk more about spotted lanternfly.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I'll just jump right into it. I think I know most of the people in the audience already. So spotted lanternfly, not as pretty as it looks. So we're going to jump into covering some of the information. Some of this, if you've seen my presentations before, you've probably seen the beginning of it. But then at the very end, I'm going to cover some of the research coming out of the East Coast that you're probably not familiar with and what is being worked on. So this is a plant hopper. It is not a moth, which some people think. It's a plant hopper. It is pretty large. It's about 1 inch long, so it's a pretty chunky insect. And it's native to Southeastern Asia, including parts of China, Taiwan, and Vietnam. It's invasive to Japan and South Korea. Egg masses were thought to have arrived on stone shipments in 2012 in Pennsylvania. And it was first founded, though, 2 years later in a wooded area of Tree of Heaven in Pennsylvania. So even though it is believed to arrive on that shipment of stone in a stone yard, it took 2 years before they actually noticed the population. And that's important because we're going to cover that a little bit later in other situations. So right now, where do we stand right now? Infestations are present in 19 states, including District of Columbia. So that's 20. I mean, it's not considered a state, but it's something in between. And so these are the states in which there are infestations currently present. In addition, there are sightings documented in 3 additional states, Iowa, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Now, a sighting means that it's been verified as being spotted lanternfly. It's not just, oh, I saw that. Okay, we're going to mark you down. It's, there's an insect. It's been verified by whatever the governing body is in that state. But they have not found a reproducing population yet, which is the difference between an infestation in which they have a population that's reproducing, that's established. And so that's the difference between our sightings and infestations. And as you can see, although all these states are listed, it's not always the whole state. Pretty much Pennsylvania, it's almost the whole state. But there are some of these states that are listed where it's just certain counties in which they found them at this point. So that's something to keep in mind. But they are moving. They are increasing. Every time I give this presentation, I'm adding more states up here. So this is out of entomologytoday.org, and they looked at the potential distribution of spotted lanternfly in the United States. So they're modeling. They're looking at the insect at spotted lanternfly, at the weather, at the humidity, and high temperatures, low temperatures, and where it's likely to find food sources. And all of that goes into a model to figure out where is it likely to move to? And so you can see in red is the where it's the highest, most likely. And here we are, Central Valley, where we do have wine grapes and Tree of Heaven, and then up in Washington and Oregon, again in wine producing areas. And so when you map that against where is it at now, These light green ones are where we just have sightings, where the green states are where we've actually have reproducing populations. And you put it side by side, it's looking pretty similar to what is predicted here. Now, we have yet to have reproducing populations on this West Coast, so California, Oregon, Washington, but we do intercept spotted lanternfly. Each of these states do on an annual basis. And so we'll cover a little bit of that in a later slide. So here we are, spotted lanternfly on grapevines, and this is what it looks like back east. We have a host range of over 100 plant species with 56 feeding hosts identified so far in North America, and this is increasing. This is hard to keep a correct tally on. This insect is highly prolificous, which means that it feeds on multiple different crops, multiple different types of trees and shrubs, herbs, anything. They see this insect move across a landscape, just feeding as it goes. So whatever it comes across, it starts feeding on for the most part. Now, its preferred host is tree of heaven. Tree of heaven originally is from China, where this insect is from, so it makes sense that they have a close relationship. Grapevines is also a very well-known host of spotted lanternfly. And I put an asterisk for black walnut and maple because from the East Coast, they are saying that they are moving towards considering this also preferred hosts. So they're often found on black walnut and maple. And so, but in addition, citrus, avocado, almonds, stone fruits, it keeps going. Hops is another popular one. Woody ornamentals. So there's a wide range. So if you think about the insect, its likelihood of being able to survive and find food is very easy if it's able to feed on multiple things and it's able to move and continuing to always find a food source. Some insects are very specific. They only feed on one type of plant, and so it's really easy. That's an easy way of controlling them. But this one does not. So this is photos of what it can look like when it aggregates. And so this insect is not only found in agricultural areas, but also wooded areas and urban areas, and it moves between these different environments to feed. It has this potential to severely harm, obviously, grape industries, we know that, but also orchards and logging industries. And it can aggregate in these very large numbers. This is not an anomaly. They see this often on the East Coast. There's a lot of photos online that you can see that aggregation. So they produce a very large amount of honeydew. So you can imagine how tiny vine millibug is and how much honeydew they can produce. Well, this insect is an inch long. It is ingesting a whole lot more of the phloem, and it is spitting out a whole lot more of that honeydew. And so, as you know, wine producers can downgrade or reject grapes with a little 3% sooty mold infection. And so that honeydew is a substrate for sooty mold to grow. This may increase your production costs, lower your crop yields, lower cold hardiness, reduce or no return a bloom or crop the following season, and cause vine death ultimately. So where they have seen death of plants from this insect are grapevines and tree of heaven. And so this is where they are really, when they get that heavy infestation, they can really sap that vine or tree dry of a lot of the phloem that is needed. So at certain times of year, that's the carbohydrates are going down in the roots. And if the insect's taking out those carbohydrates by feeding excessively, then the roots don't have the starch they need to be able to push the buds next year and to produce a crop the next year. And so that is what the issues that they're looking at. And because of this, there's potential to cause trade disruption. So wanted to talk about the numbers on this one and break it down a little bit. So I used the 2023 California crop report. When I put these slides together, that was the most recent crop report. They're always a couple years behind. And so for that year, you're looking at $23.6 billion in California annual revenue. And I broke down some of the hosts of spotted lanternfly here. And then what is the amount that California receives in annual revenue from that crop. So starting with table grapes, walnuts, peaches, nectarines, cherries, pears, plums, blueberries, apricots, apples, figs. And then we know these are hosts, but what about almonds and pistachios? Because those are not back east. So we don't know if this insect is going to like them or not, or cause damage or not. So that's a what if? We're not sure. But those are really high amounts. They're in the billions of dollars a year in revenue on those two crops. So if we break down table grapes, $658 million of table grapes, and you look at where do we export table grapes, this is the percentage that's exported to Canada, to Mexico, and then what is the equivalent value for that? And so I broke it down of what was in the crop report. And in red, these are the countries that do not. This is possibly do not. I'm not sure. Other destinations, it's hard to know where that is. But Australia, Mexico, Canada, they do not have spotted lanternfly. And so what happens is that if we get spotted lanternfly into California, into areas of table grapes, those countries easily will be like, wait, we don't want your table grapes until you can show us that there's no way that you're going to be introducing spotted lanternfly to us in these shipments. So at the very least, there is initial trade disruptions. Now, of course, they try to work through it and figure out, okay, what do we need to do to be able to sell this product to you? But that can take time, and not every country is willing to accept what we're willing to do. And so this is one of those areas that this is a lot of money. We know for sure that Canada, Mexico, and Australia do not have spotted lanternfly. Now, Taiwan and Vietnam are where it's invasive. So they also, too, can be like, we don't want you to possibly introduce more to us. Japan and Korea is where it's already at, and it's native there, so that's not really an issue. But collectively, this value is a lot. Now, if you jump to walnut, and we do the same kind of breakdown, a good portion of this breakdown in red are all the countries that do not have spotted lanternfly. Other destinations, some of those might not, I'm not sure because it's other. But here we are, Japan and Korea, South Korea, where it's native, that's not as much of an issue. But collectively, this is a lot of money that could be sort of up in the air as far as trade goes. And that's only two of the crops. So you can imagine all of these have a breakdown like that of different countries and different values. But again, this is a total of $23.6 billion in California revenue for exports. So it's not just grapes, although we think of, okay, we're concerned about grapes. It's also exported agriculture in general could have a problem when this insect arrives. So let's talk a little bit more about the insect. It has a life cycle where it's one generation a year. So it goes from egg to adult back to egg in 1 year. That is on the East Coast. Our weather on the West Coast might be able to support more than one generation. We don't know. Because we have warmer weather and cooler winters, that tends to mean that the insects emerge from the egg earlier. They start to be able to mate and produce eggs earlier, possibly able to feed longer, possibly be able to produce more eggs, creating a higher generation, higher population. So that's a possibility, but we don't know because it's not here yet. But we do know that there is a definite difference between temperatures between the East Coast and the West Coast. And so Egg laying happens between September and November. You'll find eggs on items from October to June. The nymphs, the first instars, emerge in May to June. Second, June to July. Third is June to July. Fourth, July to September. And then adults you'll find again between July and December, in which they mate and the females will be laying their eggs. So here are some photos of what do the eggs look like. You have successive rows of eggs, and then over these eggs, they cover it with this waxy deposit. And so that waxy deposit over time can wear off, and that's why you can see these ones are bare. The weather can wash some of that away. But typically you're seeing them pretty incognito, covered somewhat, they don't really stand out. And so each female can lay 1 to 2 egg masses of 30 to 50 eggs each. And eggs are laid in these multiple rows, like I said. So this photo, I feel, it can be, this makes the eggs look really big. Like, oh, I'm going to see these. I'm going to notice these. But then when you go to this slide and you see how small that egg mass actually is, it's small. They're not this big. So these little egg masses on the stone pallets and on the metal canister are actually, pretty small. So one of the things is that these eggs are laid not only on your smooth tree surfaces, but the big stickler is inanimate objects, which is very weird for an insect. Insects tend to lay, the females tend to lay eggs where there's a food source for the immatures that first emerge. This insect does not do that. It lays eggs on things that have nothing to do with trees or plants. So, telephone poles, stones, pallets, outdoor furniture, railway cars, firewood, vehicles, wheel wells of cars, light bulbs, anything that's outside, barbecues. And so this laying eggs on non-plant items contributes to its ability for wide dispersal by humans. Because if I live in Pennsylvania and I have a barbecue outside and I have a car and I decide I'm going to move to California, I'm going to pack that all into my vehicle and I'm going to drive across the country and I'm not going to pay attention to the quarantines. It's possible that you're introducing it here and not even being aware of it. So this is the unintentional introduction into these new areas. So state and federal surveyors have focused on some of these transport hubs where vehicles, goods, and people converge that contribute to the dispersal of spotted lanternfly. And it's anything social. Things that you might not have thought of before, like marinas and auctions and fairgrounds, truck rentals, obviously vineyards, but like summer camps, that's a different one. On the East Coast, this is the list of areas that they feel are associated with spotted lanternfly and in which they are, when they do these surveys, they're looking around these areas for introductions. So spotted lanternfly, we talked about a little bit, life cycle, first, second, third, and fourth instar. Instar is a fancy word for immature stage, so it's not an adult yet. And so the first 2 third instars are black with white polka dots. This looks very different than what we have out in the field now. We don't have an insect that exactly looks like this with the black and white polka dots. And then when you get to the 4th instar, it's black and red with the white polka dots. And so it's pretty noticeable, and they tend to aggregate. So they tend to, you're not usually finding just one, you find a whole bunch of them, all on one stem, all on one branch, all on one tree. And so as you can see here, some photos where you see a whole bunch of them together. You see them over the egg masses. This is the egg mass and the egg mass here. And then this is fourth instars, fourth with third instars. And so this is what it looks like out in nature when you find them. Fourth instars with adults. So here's your fourth, which are the immature. And then when they molt after being a fourth instar, then they have wings. Then they are sexually mature and able to mate, and then able to lay eggs. So the immature stages do not lay eggs. They don't have wings, but that doesn't stop them from dispersing and traveling, even without the wings. The adults, you see the forewings when they are at rest, and you can see them here with the polka dots. But when you agitate spotted lanternfly adults, they will flip their forewings forward like this and show you their hind wings, which are red. Insects don't see the color red. Vertebrates see the color red. It is meant as a defense mechanism against a vertebrate that's trying to attack them or eat them or predate on them. And so this is one of the things that is noticeable when they flip their wings forward. It is a behavior that they have. So in 2021, CDFA established a quarantine to prevent spotted lanternfly from coming into the state of California. So it's for the whole state, and it prevents the entry into California not only of spotted lanternfly, but its hosts in a variety of articles, including conveyances originating from any area where there is a spotted lanternfly infestation. And so how that is bypassed is that inspections need to be done. So obviously if you're traveling from the East Coast, it's not like we tell people to go back to Pennsylvania. We inspect their, at CDFA station, inspect their items for spotted lanternfly eggs, nymphs or adults. But also too, it has to do with nursery stock moving also across state lines. So all of that's good, but this is an example of how easy it is for it to arrive here in our county. In March of 2024, there was this arch structure that was broken down on a flatbed truck, and it was stopped at the Truckee CDFA station. It was on its way to Petaluma from New York. And so they found suspected spotted lanternfly egg masses. The eggs were sampled and they were viable, which means that given the right temperature, nymphs would have emerged. They weren't dead egg masses. They actually had viable immatures inside of the eggs. Entry was denied and the truck was returned to Sparks, where about 30 spotted lanternfly egg masses were removed, destroyed. This structure was power washed with soap and water, and then it cleared the inspection of the Nevada Department of Agriculture a few days later. It was allowed entry into California, but when all of this happened, the Sonoma County Commissioner's Office was notified immediately. Hey, there's this arch structure that's trying to come to Petaluma, and we think we found spotted lanternfly eggs on it. So they were immediately looped in. They knew it was coming, and so there was instructions to not offload until the inspector arrived, but the structure was offloaded anyways. And so when the inspector just arrived, it was already offloaded, the driver was long gone, there was no communication directly with that driver in person. So the office arrived, they inspected the structure, and then they found 3 more egg masses. Well, egg masses, again, remember, are 30 to 50 eggs, each meaning that the structure had between 990 and 1,650 spotted lanternfly eggs on it. So that structure, if it had come through, say, in the middle of the night across the border and it wasn't stopped, could have easily been put up in Petaluma, and give it a couple years and we could have had a population. Because this is enough eggs to create and start a population, a reproducing population. And so here's photos of what the egg masses look like. So it's somewhat nondescript, right? You're like, oh, is that dirt? Is that mud that got on there? But it's not. These were egg masses. So there are some new tools coming out, and this is one of them. This is showing you can go to this web address, and then you're able to track according to the model of when spotted lanternfly hatch is supposed to happen, when you should start be looking for nymphs. And so it's not here yet, but this is this is a website that allows us to predict this across the US using degree days. So, jumping into some of the current research and activity. So each year, there's a Spotted Lanternfly Summit. It is on the East Coast. The last few years have been virtual. And so I attend it because we have not only commissioners' offices, state departments, but also researchers reporting on what are they working on, what are they finding, what is useful information. And so I pulled some of the most useful information for you guys for these slides. It's not covering all the research that's happening. There's a lot of research going on the East Coast and has been for the last 10 years, which is to our benefit as Californians because although not everything is 100% transferable to California's weather and climate, a lot of it we're going to benefit from the understandings of when they fail at something and they figure something out, we're going to be able to collectively learn from that information. So one of the current research and activities is targeting egg masses. So the options for egg masses is crushing and scraping egg masses off of trees, off of items into alcohol. And they looked at the efficacy of ovicides and found that they're variable, with the best case scenario being about a 75% efficacy. Registered insecticidal oils are the most effective when applied between February and April, but they need high enough volumes for good coverage, which isn't, any oil that makes sense. Majority of eggs, though, are laid over 6 meters from the ground. And that's what they've discovered when they had a park in which they were removing some trees, and that park was infested with spotted lanternfly. So when they cut down those trees, they were able to measure lengths from the ground of the trees, and they were also able to count the spotted lanternfly egg masses, and they were able to determine that majority of the egg masses were above a 6 meter height. Yes. They have that waxy coating that makes it look like sort of like a mud splotch. Yes. Yes.
The ovicides, were those like insecticides that are labeled as ovicides, or were they looking like offering?
So I'm not reporting on the actual products because they're not necessarily registered in California. And being with UCANR, we're UCIPM, I'm not supposed to talk about pesticides that for an insect that's not currently here. So I didn't pay attention to the specifics on that one. Sorry. So spotted lanternfly detector dogs are used to sniff out egg masses on nursery shipments and conveyances. So this is something that some of the states are using because I believe the spotted lanternflies are picking up on the smell of that waxy coating on the eggs. So exploiting spotted lanternfly behavior, and here's the names of the researchers working on this. Entomopathogen treated tree bands to exploit spotted lanternfly climbing behavior. So this insect, as immatures and adults, love to climb up a tree and fall off, and climb up a tree and fall off. We don't really know why, but it's a behavior that they're seeing. And so to really exploit this, they've taken burlap bands and they wrap around infested host tree and treat it with Bovaria bassiana. So it's a fungal pathogen that is known to attack insects. And so they've only tested this at this point in the lab. So that's one thing, that this is what their intended use eventually is, but the lab results showed over 70% mortality within 5 to 10 days. Beauveria bassiana was viable for about 1 week in the direct sun, or about 3 weeks in the shade. And so what they're thinking is like, well, maybe this could be a trap that's replaced every week. Or if there's a shade covering, because they took a cone from, your dog, a cone when they get a surgery, and they put it over around the tree facing down to shade the burlap, which is a very interesting use. And so so they're viable. The Beauveria bassiana is viable for about 3 weeks in the shade. But they would like to combine this with an attractant, so like an attract kill kind of situation. Unfortunately, they're still working on attractants. Right now, we only have methyl salicylate. I can never say that one right. Salicylate. And so, this is what we currently have, but it doesn't work all that amazing. And they know that, and they're still looking at other volatiles. Is there another attractant that is better? So they're considering the future testing of another fungal pathogen that is known and been used against insects before. But this is pretty promising. Over 70% mortality rate is pretty good within 5 to 10 days. So biocontrol, looking at classical biocontrol. So that means going back to the native country where it's found, China, and finding out what is controlling the spotted lanternfly populations in China. What is the biocontrol here? Importing it into the US, going through extensive quarantine testing of what are the non-targets, what else will it attack that's similar, or does it only attack spotted lanternfly, before they're able to apply for release. And so we are looking at Anastatus orientalis. This is also native to northern China. It's an egg parasitoid. But the problems was that when they started doing this non-target testing, it did attack silk moth, squash bug, stink bug, and plant hopper, some of the native species here. So this one is not moving forward. But Dryaenus sinicus is also native to China, and that's what we see here. And this is a nymphal parasitoid of first and second instar. So this is the female. These long extensions are actually the forearms. They have raptorial forearms, very similar to a praying mantis, that can grab the insect and hold on to it and then feed on that insect, or parasitize that insect. Take its ovipositor, stick it through the insect's body, and lay an egg inside of that nymph. So they do host feed, and that's what I was saying, when they grab the first instar and they will actually feed on them. Primarily first instars, and then the second instars, they will parasitize first and second instars. So there's death of spotted lanternfly nymphs in 2 ways. They are currently submitting petition for release. So they've gone through all of these non-target tests, had great results, feel confident about this release, and they are petitioning at this point for that. And in the same time, they are increasing production capacity to ramp up the number of these parasitoids so that they could release. So here's the female, here's the male. And it's hard with this light, you can't really see, but under these little wing pads on the back of the nymph are 2 larvae, one on each side, that are developing and feeding on the insect. And eventually it'll kill that insect. But it takes time, but it starts to feed, and then it takes its nutrients away from them and eventually dies. And then here's the female, again, with the lighting's not great, and it's got its arms around a nymph and it's host feeding. Okay, current research and activity on Tree of Heaven. So one of the things they're looking at, and I think you guys have probably heard of, these trap trees. And so what they are doing is removing 90% of the male Tree of Heaven, removing 100% of the female tree of heaven, and the females produce the seeds, which these are these samaras, and that's why you want to get rid of the females, because they're producing all these seeds to spread. And they treat the remaining trees with the systemic neonic. And over 7 days, so in Pennsylvania, when they were looking at this, over 7 days, one researcher counted over 12,000 dead spotted lanternfly adults from one tree. And so, yes, this can contribute to helping reduce numbers. One of the things that they've noticed are these hot trees. Then they exist, but they don't fully understand why. And so what it means is that you have a stand of tree of heaven, and every year, this tree here is the one infested, not the one next to it, not the one next to it. It's always this tree. They like this tree, and why do they like this tree? They can't figure out why. So there's these hot trees, and it happens over and over again. They're seeing, so that's interesting behavior again, that we don't fully understand. How do they know that tree? Because that's not the same insect the following year, right? It's a whole new generation. How do they still know it's that tree? So tree of heaven is invasive tree, not generally used by pollinators or other arthropods, which is one of the concerns with doing a systemic neonic. And because it's invasive here, our native pollinators and also insects in general don't like this tree. They don't recognize this tree. The only other insect that we have here that really likes this tree is brown marmorated stink bug, which is also invasive from China, right? And so it also loves this tree. So spotted lanternfly, they have determined, can complete their life cycle without tree of heaven. Early on, before the research was done, there was talk of, well, it needs tree of heaven, let's get rid of tree of heaven, and that's the answer. And it's not, unfortunately, it's not the complete answer, I guess I should say. So they have done cage studies that indicated that spotted lanternfly feeding on tree of heaven may improve their fitness. And what does the fitness mean when it comes to an insect? And that is a higher adult survival, faster development, and increased egg masses. So it helps them, but they don't need it to be able to complete their life cycle. So getting rid of tree of heaven is not going to get rid of spotted lanternfly, but it can make it not such a great environment for spotted lanternfly. Some of the research on biocontrol of tree of heaven, this Verticillium non-alphae has been field testing on the East Coast, and it's a native-born fungus that attacks tree of heaven, causing vascular wilt, rapid yellowing, defoliation, and oftentimes death in one season. It's pretty good. And this strain is being tested is host adapted to tree of heaven. So it doesn't pose a significant threat to native or non-target plant species. So this is another thing, another tool that we are developing and understanding of control of tree of heaven. In addition, there are two insects that well, this isn't an insect. There are two insect and a mite that they're looking at to help control tree of heaven. This first one here, again, both of these are native to China. So this is classical biocontrol, going back to the source and finding what is attacking this at the source, because tree of heaven is also from China. And this specialist that feeds exclusively on tree of heaven. So this trunk boring weevil will feed exclusively on tree of heaven. It attacks really large trees. And this is awaiting currently approval for release in Canada. And so they've already done all of the testing needed of their native species to make sure that it's not going to switch to a different host. And so that's where we're standing here. This is also out of Canada. And this is an Eriophyid mite. So you guys deal with that with blister mites, bud mites. It's the same kind. But it's attacking tree of heaven, and it's most effective on seedlings. Undergoing the necessary testing for release in Canada currently. And so, yes, that's Canada and that's not the US. But when something is released in Canada, if that is something has a potential here, researchers can pick that up, and a lot of that research data can be reusable, but also then they would test any native species that say aren't in Canada but are where we want to release it. So it makes the process a lot shorter. So take-home message from Julie Urban, Penn State University. She came out here to speak with us about spotted lanternfly, and there is no silver bullet. So all these things I talked about, it's like, okay, well, it gives you 70% or at most 75%, or it might do this. But effective management is going to require multiple tools targeting spotted lanternfly. And there's a lot of these tools here that they're doing research on. And so it's going to be a matter of, there's not just one thing, unfortunately. It's going to be multiple things in order to control this insect and the damage that it can cause. Okay, quickly, although fourth and stars in adults, spotted lanternfly are attracted to tree of heaven, it is not required to complete their life cycle. When spotted lanternfly was first been found in regions back east, after an investigation, it discovered that they have already been present for 2 to 3 years in that area, which is why getting these photos out over and over and over again and drilling as much as possible, if we can detect this early, then we have a chance at eradication, similar to European grapevine moth. Eradication is really not possible once it's established, and 2 and 3 years, usually it's established. So, detecting it early is very important. Although they're not good flyers, they're very highly mobile. They're able to move across a landscape and disperse. And we're seeing that in the research coming out of the East Coast. So one of the issues for us is that spotted lanternfly adults enter a vineyard in large numbers right before harvest. That's when they love vineyards, timed right before the harvest, which affects the ability to control due to the pre-harvest intervals and continued immigration. So there are a lot of products they talk about on the East Coast. If you go to Penn State University or Cornell, they have a whole list of organic and conventional pesticides that can be used. And there's a lot of great knockdown products out there that are working. The problem is that they keep coming in. And you have a pre-harvest interval and you need to harvest. And so at some point you're going to have to stop spraying. And that's where the problems really happen and the concern. So please report any sightings. You can always, if you think you see something, document the GPS coordinates of where you're at. Collect the insect if you can. They cannot bite you. They won't bite you, none of the life stages, so you can pick them up with your hands. Put it in a Ziploc bag, put it in a plastic bag, put it in a Tupperware container. It doesn't, bring it to us, bring it to me, bring it to the commissioner's office. At the very least, snap a photo, send it to me. Hey, is this what I think it is? I do get texts like that all the time. Or emails too, that I can look at. But definitely document where you're at. So if you're in a vineyard or somewhere, you need to know, was it row 18 or was it row 22? And where exactly? It's important so that investigations can happen. If you want to know more about spotted lanternfly, or you would like to have a printout of photos and information that you can post somewhere public at your work, this is in English and this is in Spanish. Same newsletter. This is where you can access it and download. It's a downloadable PDF, double-sided. Also for Tree of Heaven, if you want to read more about how to identify Tree of Heaven, because there are species of plants that look similar, and the information that we have about it, you can also access this information that I've written here at this email address. And I am going to plug our workshops next week. If you're interested in an ant ID workshop, or sharpshooter and leafhopper workshop, ID workshop. We're having them next week, the 29th and the 30th. Registration is here. You can always shoot me an email and I can send you the links. These ID is an hour and a half approved CUs, and then the sharpshooter is 1 hour. And with that, here's my email address. Here's the links to those 2 articles. And I think I have time for questions. Yeah.
Are they just not a preferred resource for birds? And what about bats?
So the spotted lanternfly are not active at night, and that would prevent bats from accessing them. Like moths are great for bats because they're active at night, right? And they fly. And so birds do feed on them, but not in high enough numbers to actually have an impact. If each female can lay up to 100 eggs, these populations explode. And that's where you see the aggregations of all of them, and there's not enough birds to have an impact. Yes, putting songbird boxes, some of them will be fed on, but again, there's no silver bullet, right? It's like that would be one piece of the pie. Yeah.
Cindy, it's the eggs are the overwintering, right?
Yes.
And then emergence in like now, right? More or less.
Yes.
April, May, right? Time. So have the people in the West Coast looked at using something like the Thorvald stuff in vineyards?
Thorvald?
Yeah, the SAG robotics, the UV, to destroy egg masses.
Well, we don't have them here.
No, I mean there.
Oh.
So have they looked at that there? Because of course vineyards are VSP there, right? That's what those machines are set up for. It's high intensity UV. I mean, I don't know. Like, would that damage enough eggs? Would the DNA damage to make the fecundity? So instead of a huge number emerging, you're lowering, the number of potential emergences.
So I have
in vineyard, as opposed to obviously the environment is a different story.
I have not read any research looking into that. No. I think one of the challenges would be the waxy coating over the eggs is pretty protective. But I haven't read anything. There's a lot of research going on though. So, I mean, like there's RNAi they're looking at. So there's a lot that I touched on the things that were the most useful for us, but there's a whole bunch of research going on. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
It seems that the insect doesn't live in the vineyard. They move right before harvest, as you explained, or
So there is, so I don't have the data here, but there is a researcher that has looked at this over a season, where it was in a vineyard, they had egg masses on the end posts, covered, and so then they quantified it over a season. And what they showed was, okay, if you look at a graph of over time, the different instars, first, second, third, fourth adults, and so the first, and this is the population, like how much, first instars were here, second were here, third were here, fourth was here. Adults were higher than the first, the immigration. And so what it is it's not so much that you don't have it in the vineyard, because you can. Though, each time they go from one life stage to the next, some of them die. Some of them die naturally, some of them get squashed, some of them get eaten by a bird, so it makes sense that population, which cannot fly, so it's only really the local population right there, would actually be reduced over time. But then again, the adults immigrate in and it's higher than the original population. And they've documented that. And that's the immigration. That's where these other stages, because they don't fly, you can apply a pesticide, say, that is a knockdown pesticide, right? But this immigration, that's the problem right before harvest with the pre-harvest intervals. And that's really where I see there's going to be an issue. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
are they crawling in from neighboring vineyards, or if they can't fly, how are they getting in? Are there populations close and then they're just crawling in, or what?
This is the immature stages, the ones without wings, right? One egg, so there was that vineyard where they documented eggs were laid on the end post. So the eggs were there, so they were there, and that's not a problem. But another behavior of this insect is that they sort of move across the landscape and just keep feeding. So it's not an insect that you find, on a grapevine that's going to stay on a grapevine. It just keeps going until it becomes an adult fly, and then it usually goes to tree of heaven and grapevines. So their hosts change as they progress, if that makes sense. The hosts that you'll find on adults tend to be different hosts than the immatures are on. The immatures sort of eat whatever they come across. Yeah.
Has there been any other work on research for vector, like Cushing's disease, or serving as a vector for anything?
Yeah, so in this summit, there was no update on that. So the researchers on the East Coast are looking, can it vector Xylella fastidiosa that causes Pierce's disease? Because, it's a large insect that does feed on grapevines. And there is not published data on that, and they did not cover that, so I don't have an update. I know that they're working on it, but I don't believe they've released, yes, this is working, no, this isn't working yet. Yes?
Other than identifying the insect, is there symptoms on the grapevine? Would you say like the first symptom to stand out, would it be the honeydew, or would it be like actually if they're feeding? Would there be some other symptom that?
So the adults are very large and they aggregate. So it's like you've seen some of the photos where on the grapevines, they just cover the grapevine. So it's visually you're able to see them.
Together in large numbers.
So they immigrate in large numbers. Now, I want to show you this photo when it came, honeydew. So you can see here, this is all honeydew that's fermenting. That's how much honeydew it is. This is all honeydew that they found in a forest area, and it starts to ferment so you can smell it. So then you are able to sort of find where they're at in a forested area. It's excessive amount. And actually one of the winemakers in Virginia were talking about how she had stuck fermentations because she said she had leftover fructose. So the fermentation went through, and you need, I believe, equal amounts of glucose and fructose. And then when you get to the point that you only have fructose left, the yeast was not able to ferment the fructose because it's not fructophilus or whatever. Yeah, so she said it only, that was her first year having the problem and the infestation. She's like, I'll see if the same problem's happening next year. But it's one thing that she's like, what's different? All these years I haven't had this problem. What's different? Well, I have a new spotted lanternfly infestation. And all that honeydew gets on the outside of those grapes, and that all gets processed together. So it gets into the must.
Yeah. On the base of like a tree of heaven, if they're laying their eggs up high or if they're hanging out up high, then the honeydew would maybe be the best telltale symptom.
Yeah, and from what I've been told, you can smell the honeydew because it starts to ferment for not very long after. It's in such large, copious amounts. Yeah.
I also heard somebody was collecting the honeydew and putting a jar, jarring it.
Yeah, so they have bees that are collecting the honeydew to make honey and then selling that. Because it's a sugar source. I mean, if you think about it, it's a strong sugar source.
Was there any update on research in off flavors and wine production from?
So the same winemaker in Virginia They were saying that they did not find any off flavors. But I assume in Virginia they're producing whites. So I don't think it's been done where it's been tested, different cultivars, and to do sensory evaluation. But it seems like a necessary step to be able to say that's not an issue. Stuck fermentations it makes sense. Like if you think about what she said, it's like, well, that sort of makes sense to me how that could happen. Yeah.
I have a non-spotted Lanternfly question about, have you seen an increase in blue-green sharpshooters this year?
Okay, so my trapping, I was just talking about this. My trapping, no. But I have had people reach out to me with trapping that, yes. My trapping, I have to, is the trap locations were chosen under certain parameters, not where is the highest population. It had to do with distance from riparian, distance from buildings, right? And so my traps are a couple vines in to the vineyard. The people that have reported high populations of blue-green sharpshooters to me, their traps are at the riparian area. Very different. Blue-green sharp, how many actually come into the vineyard compared to how much live right here. And so, yes and no is the answer to that one.
All right, if no other questions.
In the past, I have read that by feeding on Tree of Heaven, the lanternflies acquired alkaloids that made them distasteful to predators. Is that still current?
So by feeding on Tree of Heaven, it makes sense that they acquire alkaloids. But when I mentioned this to Julie Urban, she sort of like, nah, not really. So a lot of information comes out online that's not necessarily what the researchers are seeing. So that's one of those things where, not to my knowledge. Yeah.
Thank you, Cindy.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sign out, I believe.